We got Tom Fitton on the line, president of Judicial Watch. And Tom, the big news this week was, needless to say, the Mueller indictments not coming down, the William Barr summary of the 2-year special counsel indicates zero collusion from the president. Certainly no evidence of obstruction of justice also, though the media is trying to cling to that as a hope of something to hit the president or his family members, though I guess it is sort of... let's actually start there. I want to get your thoughts on the collusion narrative, too. But this the obstruction of justice chatter that we're still seeing, it's so ridiculous that we would be even thinking about obstruction of justice into what is proven to be a witch hunt. Like, who cares if anyone obstructed justice at this point? When we know for the most part the president was cooperative, and we know that the special counsel didn't turn anything up. So do we really want to focus on more obstruction of justice over in a special counsel that did not find anything?
Well, obstruction of justice is you can obstruct justice for investigations, whether or not they conclude in other criminal charges. The investigation's ongoing, you're obstructing that justice. But here the allegation would be it's obstruction of justice for the president to do his job, which is to make sure there are no corrupt officials in office, such as James Comey, and remove him from office, and then defend himself publicly from in tweets and other comments in his role as president from government misconduct and allegations that have turned out to be false. Defending yourself is not obstruction of justice. Obstruction of justice is paying a witness off, providing something corruptly to someone to influence an investigation, and you know it exactly when you see it. Here, the left has come up with this new theory of obstruction of justice, which is complaining that you're subject unfairly to an investigation, and as president, being willing possibly to do something about it is obstruction of justice, and that's just silly. I mean, at one point it was reported that Mueller considered criticism and was investigating criticism of him as obstruction of justice. And, he's not king of the Justice Department. He's not king of the United States. And we are allowed to criticize prosecutors and public officials like himself. And it turns out the criticism was well-founded, given the fact that there was nothing there, and Mueller continued to harass the president nevertheless.
Yeah, and it went on for years, and it wasted a bunch of time and a bunch of money, and it further divided the country. And it's to suggest that you don't have the free speech opportunity. Again, the president did not interfere at all. So if you don't have the opportunity to talk, if you don't, then obstruction of justice. Robert Mueller does not trump the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. So, Tom, give us your big picture reaction to this. I'm sure you feel a big sense of vindication here, as does much of the audience. But what was your reaction to the William Barr summary?
Oh, it's an extraordinary vindication of the president. There is no collusion. There's no evidence of collusion. So all of that news that we've been hearing, the dossier, the pretextual reasons for spying on Trump, none of that in retrospect, and they've known that for some time, I'm convinced, has turned out to be valid evidence of collusion. So there was never any evidence of collusion. And and those of us who said that there was no evidence of collusion have been proven right, because we've all seen what's been in the public domain there, and as things have leaked out as a result of documents we've uncovered and the investigative activity of a handful of members of Congress, they concluded there was no obstruction of justice, no collusion as well. The outrageous thing to me is that the key indictments on the so-called Russia issues, which is the hacking and the involvement, the Russian disguised involvement in the elections process. Mueller indicted some folks there that he's never going to be able to pursue because they're all in Russia. So in many ways, that was just a silly exercise. But on top of that, that all confirmed there was no knowing American involvement in any of that. And that's when it all should have been shut down in the least. But frankly, Alex, Judicial Watch has been calling attention to the Mueller overreach from the moment almost he was appointed. Had been virtually alone in standing up against it. We've had many who criticize the process underlying the Mueller investigation that led to it. But we have always thought that the Mueller investigation was a constitutional abomination, certainly as it regards the president. It certainly as it respects the president of the United States. And it interfered with the operations of the president. It harassed the president. And it couldn't have come to a conclusion soon enough.
So what do you think of the concept of special counsels in general? Because I think special counsels are I think it's almost like you're asking for a massive abuse of power like we witnessed here. But also, what about having a second special counsel now into the special counsel or into the origins of this massive hoax, the biggest hoax that I can imagine in American history, that all of this time and effort. And by the way, if I was on the left, I would be so bitter right now after 2 years of being promised that we were going to get the president.
They're not bitter. Look, most of the folks who were pushing this knew they were lying. They were lying when they were pushing this. I mean, there may be some activists who might have bought into it, and normal people who bought into it because based on the promotion of the media and others. But the media conspired with those who were illegally trying to target the president. No one's bitter on it. They just were caught, and that's why they don't want to apologize.
So what do you think about the process itself? How do you reform the process so that we don't?
Well, there should be no special counsels. I noticed this immediately. And this is coming from someone who called for special counsels every time it rained. But when you look at the regulations, they're immediately recognizable as unconstitutional in the sense they set up an attorney from the outside who basically is not reportable in any practical, doesn't report in any practical way to anyone that is answerable to the United States people. And so it's a train that gets set in motion and that has its own power and life of its own, that we don't control as a people, and that's why it ought not to be part of the consideration. Now, certainly as it respects the president of the United States, I mean, the Justice Department investigating the president for conduct as president doesn't make any sense. The complaint is that Attorney General Barr tried to figure out, made the conclusion that he couldn't indict the president. Well, Attorney General Barr doesn't really have any power but for his relationship to the president. So in the end, you get the president figuring out whether to indict himself for misconduct as president. I mean, that's not the way it works, and it shows you why the investigation should have taken place to begin with, and at least for his official acts. If there's something worthy of a prosecution, well, it's prosecuted. We don't need any more special counsels or special prosecutors. We need prosecutions. And in my view, a special prosecutor at this time would be an excuse by the bureaucracy to kick the can down the road. And since the target is likely to be people the establishment wants to protect, making it impossible in the long run to get anything done.
When did you get the sense that Bob Mueller was a dirty cop? For me, it was when he clearly tried to make an effort to ruin Michael Flynn over nothing and make it very personal to destroy him and to send the signal that if you're connected to the president, then we will destroy you if we can. But I got a feeling you were probably hip to it a little sooner than that, Tom.
Oh, he's no saint. I mean, look, we knew that he was coordinating with Lois Lerner's IRS, or at least his FBI was. They took 1 million pages of IRS documents they had no right to, as they were thinking of ways to put the people that Lerner was persecuting in jail. And they had to return those documents once they were found out by Judicial Watch and Congress. You had Mueller come in, was conflicted almost immediately because of his seeking or being under consideration by the White House for the FBI job again. Yet he then starts investigating how that job came about. That job opening came about. Did he interview himself in the investigation? Then he hires all of these partisans, including partisans that it doesn't necessarily prohibit them from being on board, but they were so partisan that they should have been prohibited from being on board, like Andrew Weissman, who was an anti-Trumper and advocate for Hillary Clinton. And then you had these abuses during the investigation. Forget about the prosecutorial decisions, but the raids on Manafort with guns drawn, the unequal application of the law in terms of the Foreign Agents Registration Act, and then his last act, smear the president on his way out the door with this innuendo of obstruction of justice that he, quote, couldn't make a decision on. That, of course, as you see, the left is trying to desperately hang on to. But it really was, and the Mueller team wasn't the only issue here, but the whole operation, from spying on President Trump, targeting of Trump, the candidate Trump, through the appointment of Mr. Mueller, and now the baton will be handed off to the House Democrats as they harass the president for an impeachment inquiry. It's an illicit attempt to overthrow the president, and it was an attack and assault on our republic.
I think so, too. Tom Fitton's with me, president of Judicial Watch. Now, Tom, last question today. What do you think we could do if we want to hold some of those who abuse the system accountable? Because we've been calling this a witch hunt for a long time. They turned up nothing, and yet they really, the country is so much more divided now that because of this process. What can be done to investigate the hoax and perhaps hold some of those accountable who were responsible for getting us out of control as it did?
Well, the Justice Department, if they're on the ball, and General Barr did the right thing with President Trump here. I hope he does the right thing in the follow-up, and so we can hope. But Judicial Watch is doing its own investigations. Our litigation uncovered key documents about this deep state coup, and we're going to keep on fighting in court on that. And let's hope the Justice Department stops the obstruction, and the president should intervene directly and go on a transparency tear and order state, DOJ, FBI, NSA, CIA, all the agencies that Obama corruptly influenced and corruptly ran to target him, to expose everything that went on against him and other Americans. And on top of that, he should be ordering finally a full, fair, and unbiased investigation into Clinton Inc.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's exactly where things need to go, because remember, it all originates with Hillary Clinton. It originates with her, with the funding of the PP dossier, and then them cooking up the Russian collusion conspiracy within 24 hours after the election. I think that's where it begins, and not to mention Hillary's connections to Russia that we've documented over and over and over again with Peter Schweitzer. So I would start with that. Let's go from there. Tom Fitton, I know you'll be on the case, president of Judicial Watch, one of the few groups in Washington that actually gets anything done. Thanks, Tom.
You're welcome. Thank you, Alex.